Have you looked at your clematis this July and thought, that's it, it's finished? The flowers are fading. The leaves don't look as rich as they did in spring. Growth has slowed. Some stems may even look completely dead. Most gardeners panic right here. They water every evening. They pour on fertilizer hoping for another flush of blooms. Some even cut the entire vine back because they think it's dying. And those three mistakes often do far more damage than the July heat ever could. Here's the truth. July isn't the month your clematis dies. It's the month that determines how many flowers you'll have for the rest of this season, and even next spring. Even vines that look completely dead can often come back to life with the right care. Today, I'll show you exactly what your clematis needs this month, the biggest mistakes to avoid, and why experienced gardeners never panic when their vine starts looking tired in July. But before we dive into today's video, I have a major announcement. The gardening guide you've been writing to me about for months is finally here. The Plant Once Garden is officially out. You have been incredibly patient with me while I took the time to get this right. It is approximately 150 pages of everything this channel teaches, gathered into one complete reference, designed with a hand-drawn heritage cover and warm cream pages that feel like a guide your grandmother would have owned. Inside, you'll find the 90 perennial plants that come back every year with almost no labor, 6 complete garden plans, the no-labor planting calendar, and the hydrogen peroxide method explained completely. I've also included the specific perennials that bring hummingbirds singing and dancing right outside your window, the chapter on what your garden becomes over 20 years, and the mistakes that kill perennials. This is a reference you can lean on for the rest of your gardening life. You can scan the QR code on your screen right now, or click the link in the pinned comment or description below to get your copy. Thank you again for your patience. Now, back to the garden. The first thing you need to understand is that July changes the way a clematis behaves. During spring, the plant is focused on rapid growth. New shoots race upward, leaves expand almost daily, and flowers become the center of attention. July is different. Instead of producing endless new growth, the plant shifts into survival mode. Its priority becomes protecting itself from prolonged heat, conserving moisture, and storing energy for future growth. Unfortunately, many gardeners mistake this perfectly natural slowdown for decline. A clematis that isn't growing as aggressively as it did in May isn't necessarily unhealthy. It's simply responding to summer. The real danger comes when we fight that natural cycle. Adding large amounts of high nitrogen fertilizer encourages soft, weak growth that struggles in the heat. Watering lightly every evening keeps only the soil surface wet, encouraging shallow roots that become even more vulnerable to high temperatures. Heavy pruning at the wrong time removes stems the plant still depends on. Instead of helping, these reactions create more stress. Successful July care is surprisingly simple. Protect the roots. Keep watering consistent. Remove only what needs removing. Support the plant instead of forcing it. Everything else becomes much easier once you understand that philosophy. And that brings us to the single most important job you'll do this month. Protecting the roots. Most people focus all their attention on the flowers climbing the trellis. Experienced gardeners focus on what's happening underground. A clematis loves sunshine on its vines, but it hates heat around its roots. That's because its feeder roots sit surprisingly close to the soil surface. After several hours of intense afternoon sun, the upper layer of soil can become dramatically hotter than the surrounding air. When that happens, those delicate feeder roots begin to struggle. The first signs are easy to miss. Growth slows. Flower buds stop developing. Leaves lose some of their deep green color. The plant isn't thirsty because it lacks water. It's stressed because its root zone is overheating. The solution isn't more fertilizer. It's insulation. Spread a 2 to 3 inch layer of shredded bark, wood chips, or finished compost around the root zone. That protective layer works like insulation on a house. It helps the soil stay cooler during the hottest part of the day, reduces moisture loss, and creates a much more stable environment for the roots. But here's the mistake many gardeners make. Never pile mulch directly against the crown of the plant. Leave a small breathing ring around the base, where the stems emerge from the soil. When mulch stays pressed against the woody stems, it traps constant moisture exactly where you don't want it. Over time, that creates ideal conditions for crown rot and fungal diseases. If you want an even better solution, copy what many experienced gardeners do. Instead of relying only on mulch, plant low-growing companions around the base of your clematis. Plants like hardy geraniums, coral bells, or creeping phlox naturally shade the soil while allowing air to circulate around the crown. The result is cooler roots, steadier moisture, and a healthier clematis throughout the hottest weeks of summer. And once the roots are protected, the next job is deciding which flowers should stay and which ones need to come off immediately. Now that the roots are protected from the worst of the summer heat, it's time to look higher up the vine. This is where many gardeners unknowingly cost themselves a second flush of flowers. They leave every faded bloom exactly where it is. At first glance, that seems harmless. After all, the flower is finished. What difference could it possibly make? Quite a lot. The moment a flower finishes blooming, your clematis begins changing its priorities. Instead of producing more flowers, it starts putting energy into making seeds. Those fluffy, silver seed heads many gardeners admire are certainly attractive, but they're expensive for the plant to produce. Building seeds requires sugars, moisture, and nutrients that could otherwise be directed into fresh shoots and new flower buds. For repeat blooming clematis varieties, allowing every spent flower to mature into a seed head can dramatically reduce the late summer display. Fortunately, the solution is simple. Deadhead the plant. But do it correctly. One of the biggest mistakes gardeners make is pulling the faded flower off with their fingers or cutting randomly along the stem. Neither approach gives the best result. Instead, follow the flower stem downward until you reach the first strong pair of healthy green leaves. That's the point you're looking for. Using a clean, sharp pair of pruners, make your cut just above that leaf joint. It may seem like a tiny detail, but that's exactly where dormant buds are waiting. Once the old flower is removed, the plant redirects its energy into those buds, encouraging new side shoots that often produce another round of blooms later in the season. It's one of the easiest jobs you'll do all month, yet it can make an enormous difference. However, there's one important exception. Not every clematis should be deadheaded with the expectation of getting more flowers. Some varieties bloom only once each year. Others naturally continue blooming, regardless of whether you remove old flowers. If you still have the original plant label, check which type you have. If you don't worry. Making clean cuts above healthy leaves is still a safe way to tidy the plant without causing unnecessary damage. While you're removing faded flowers, pay attention to something else. Look at where the newest shoots are growing. July is one of the fastest periods of vine extension, and those fresh green stems are incredibly soft. Unlike ivy, clematis doesn't cling to walls with sticky roots. Unlike wisteria, it doesn't wrap thick woody stems around supports. Instead, clematis climbs using its leaf stalks. Each delicate leaf stem reaches out, finds something narrow enough to grip, and slowly curls around it, like a tiny hand holding onto a railing. It's an elegant climbing system, but it's also surprisingly fragile. If several new shoots are left to grow unchecked, they quickly wrap around one another instead of the trellis. Within a couple of weeks, they become a tangled knot. When a summer thunderstorm arrives, that tangled mass catches the wind like a sail. Instead of moving freely, the stems twist against each other. Tender growth snaps. Flower buds break off. And weeks of new growth can disappear in a single afternoon. That's why experienced gardeners spend just a few minutes each week guiding new shoots. There's no need to force the vine. Simply separate any stems that have begun wrapping around each other. Gently guide them toward open sections of the support where they have room to spread naturally. This creates a healthier framework, improves air circulation, and allows sunlight to reach more of the plant. it also transforms the way the clematis blooms. Instead of producing one heavy cluster of flowers near the top of the trellis, the blooms become evenly distributed from the bottom right to the very top. The entire support becomes covered in color, rather than just the upper corner. If a stem needs extra support, avoid tying it tightly. Remember, these stems continue thickening throughout the summer. A tight tie that seems harmless today can slowly cut into the stem as it grows. Always use soft garden ties and leave enough space for the stem to expand naturally. It's a small habit that prevents unnecessary damage later in the season. While you're arranging the vine, don't rush away. Take another minute to study the leaves. Flowers come and go. Leaves tell the real story. Long before a clematis stops blooming, the foliage begins revealing exactly how the plant is coping with summer conditions. Learning to read those signals can help you solve problems before they become serious. And that's exactly what we'll cover next, because your clematis leaves are often trying to tell you something long before the flowers ever do. Now let's move on to one of the most valuable skills every clematis grower can develop. Learning to read the leaves. Flowers tell you how the plant performed yesterday. Leaves tell you how it's performing today. If you know what to look for, your clematis will often warn you about a problem long before it becomes serious. Let's start with something that scares many gardeners unnecessarily. Yellow leaves near the bottom of the vine. If only the oldest leaves closest to the ground are turning yellow, while the rest of the plant remains green, healthy, and vigorous, don't panic. That's completely normal. As the season progresses, the clematis naturally sheds older foliage that receives very little sunlight. The plant redirects its energy toward the younger stems and leaves that are actively producing food through photosynthesis. It's simply becoming more efficient. No treatment is needed. However, if the entire vine begins turning a pale green or washed-out yellow, that's a very different situation. Now the plant is telling you that something is affecting the whole root system. In many cases, this points to poor nutrition, compacted soil that limits oxygen around the roots, or soil that stays wet for far too long after watering. Instead of adding fertilizer immediately, inspect the soil first. Is it hard and compacted? Does water pool around the base after rain? Has the mulch been piled too closely against the crown? Correcting those problems often restores healthy growth far more effectively than adding more plant food. Another common warning sign appears around the edges of the leaves. Brown, crispy margins usually indicate that the plant cannot replace moisture as quickly as it's losing it. During intense July heat, leaves lose water through tiny openings, called stomata. When evaporation outpaces the root's ability to absorb moisture, those leaf edges begin drying first. Many gardeners assume this means they should water every evening. Unfortunately, that often makes things worse. Frequent shallow watering keeps moisture trapped near the soil surface, encouraging roots to remain close to the heat instead of growing deeper where conditions stay cooler. A deep watering schedule is almost always the better solution, and we'll cover exactly how to do that later in this video. Now let's look for another warning sign: a white, powdery coating on the leaves. This is one of the most common fungal problems gardeners notice during warm, humid weather: powdery mildew. Although it looks alarming, it rarely means the plant is beyond saving. In fact, improving the growing conditions is often more effective than immediately reaching for chemical sprays. Look around your clematis. Have nearby shrubs become overgrown? Are weeds trapping humidity around the base? Has the vine become so dense that air can barely move through it? Good airflow is one of the simplest and most effective ways to reduce fungal problems. Removing a few overcrowded stems and clearing surrounding vegetation often allows the leaves to dry much faster after rain or morning dew. That alone can make a tremendous difference. Another pest becomes active during exactly the opposite weather: hot, dry, sunny. Spider mites thrive under those conditions. The frustrating part is that they're almost impossible to see with the naked eye. Instead of looking for the insects themselves, look for the damage they leave behind. Tiny pale speckles begin appearing across the upper surface of the leaves. The rich green color slowly fades. Eventually, the foliage starts looking dusty and unhealthy. Turn a few leaves over and inspect the undersides carefully. That's where these tiny pests gather. If you catch them early, you usually don't need harsh chemicals. A strong stream of water directed underneath the leaves can physically knock large numbers of spider mites off the plant. Repeat this regularly while keeping the soil consistently moist, and many small infestations disappear before they ever become serious. Now let's talk about one problem that causes more unnecessary panic than almost anything else. A drooping clematis. Picture a hot July afternoon. The sun has been beating down for hours. You walk outside and your clematis looks limp. The leaves are hanging. The flowers seem tired. Many gardeners immediately assume the plant is dying. Most of the time it isn't. Large flowering vines naturally lose some internal water pressure during extreme afternoon heat. This temporary softening is called heat stress. If the vine stands back up during the evening, or looks perfectly healthy again the following morning, everything is working exactly as it should. The plant simply slowed down until temperatures became more comfortable. No emergency action is needed. True clematis wilt looks completely different. Instead of the entire plant appearing slightly soft, one healthy stem suddenly collapses almost overnight. Its leaves quickly darken. Flowers shrivel. The entire stem looks as though someone cut it near the ground. Meanwhile, every other stem on the same plant continues looking perfectly healthy. That's the difference. Heat affects the entire vine temporarily. Wilt attacks individual stems suddenly and severely. If you confirm true clematis wilt, don't panic. Most gardeners make the mistake of digging the entire plant out. Don't. Take a pair of sharp pruning shears and disinfect the blades thoroughly with rubbing alcohol. Then follow the damaged stem all the way down toward the base of the plant. Cut several inches below the lowest visible sign of disease. Immediately place the infected material into a bag and throw it in the trash. Never compost it. One infected stem should never become next year's problem. Here's the encouraging part. Many clematis recover remarkably well after wilt because they were planted correctly. When planted a few inches deeper than they originally grew in their nursery pot, several healthy buds remain safely below the soil surface. Even if every stem above ground is lost, those hidden buds often produce vigorous new shoots only weeks later. What looks like the end of the plant can actually become a fresh beginning. By the way, if you're looking to completely transform your yard into a low-maintenance paradise, don't forget that my full reference guide, The Plant Once Garden, is now officially available. It's 150 pages covering all the perennial foundations and permanent setups we talk about on this channel. You can scan the QR code right here on the screen, or find the link in the pinned comment below to grab your copy. Now, let's get right back into today's topic. Once you've learned how to diagnose problems correctly, the next step is knowing how to support healthy growth without accidentally creating new problems. And that starts with one of the most misunderstood jobs in July: feeding your clematis. Now that we've covered what can go wrong, let's talk about something that surprises many gardeners. Sometimes the biggest mistake isn't what you do, it's what you feed your clematis. By July, many gardeners become impatient. The spring flowers have faded, growth has slowed, and they reach for a fertilizer with the highest nitrogen number they can find. It seems logical. More fertilizer should mean more growth. But that's rarely how a clematis responds in midsummer. High nitrogen fertilizers encourage the plant to produce large amounts of soft, lush foliage. For a few days, everything looks greener, healthier, more vigorous. Then the problems begin. The plant starts investing nearly all of its energy into producing leaves instead of flower buds. Those fresh green shoots are also extremely tender. They break more easily in summer storms. They attract chewing insects. They're more vulnerable to fungal diseases because the tissues haven't had time to harden properly. Instead of helping the plant prepare for the months ahead, excessive feeding keeps it stuck, producing weak growth it can't properly support. That's why experienced gardeners take a completely different approach. If your clematis is growing in healthy garden soil that's regularly improved with compost, chances are it doesn't need additional fertilizer in July at all. The compost continues releasing nutrients slowly, giving the plant exactly what it needs without forcing unnatural growth. Container-grown clematis are a little different. Every time you water a pot, some nutrients wash out through the drainage holes. Over time, the growing mix becomes less fertile. If your clematis is growing in a container and has already finished its main spring display, a light application of a balanced, slow-release fertilizer can help replace those lost nutrients. The key word is light. You're supporting the plant. You're not trying to force it into another burst of growth. As July comes to an end, feeding should stop altogether. This allows the stems already produced during the growing season to mature and harden before colder weather arrives. Strong, mature stems survive winter far better than soft, rapidly growing ones. Sometimes doing less truly produces better results. Once your feeding routine is under control, there's one final July job that many gardeners overlook completely, until the day a storm arrives. Take a careful look at your clematis support. Not the plant, the support itself. Back in spring, that trellis may have been holding only a few lightweight stems. Now it's supporting months of new growth. Leaves, flowers, developing seed heads. Every week the weight increases. By mid to late summer, a healthy clematis can become surprisingly heavy. Then summer storms arrive. Strong winds don't just blow against individual leaves. They push against the entire vine like a giant sail. If the trellis is loose, if the screws have started pulling away from the wall, or if an old wooden support has begun weakening, that extra pressure can become too much. And when a support fails, the damage is rarely limited to the trellis. Older clematis stems become woody and brittle as the season progresses. They don't bend the way young shoots do. They snap. Sometimes years of carefully trained growth can be destroyed in one evening simply because nobody checked a loose bracket or a weakened post. Fortunately, preventing that kind of damage takes only a few minutes. Walk around the entire structure. Give it a gentle shake. Does it move? Are any screws loose? Have wire supports become slack? Has garden twine become brittle after weeks of intense sunshine? Replace anything that no longer feels secure. Those small repairs today may prevent major losses tomorrow. While you're inspecting the support, pay close attention to the stems themselves. Look for places where heavy branches are rubbing against rough wood, exposed screws, or sharp metal edges. Every gust of wind causes movement. That repeated rubbing slowly wears away the protective outer bark. Once the bark is damaged, fungi and disease organisms have a much easier path into the stem. A simple adjustment now can prevent much larger problems later. Try to spread the vine evenly across the support rather than allowing all the weight to collect in one area. Not only does this create a much more attractive display of flowers, but it also distributes the weight more evenly across the structure. The entire system becomes stronger. The vine catches less wind, and individual stems experience less strain. These are the small maintenance jobs that rarely appear in gardening books, yet experienced growers perform them almost automatically every summer. They understand that protecting the framework is just as important as caring for the plant itself. At this point, your clematis has cooler roots, cleaner growth, healthier foliage, sensible feeding, and a stronger support system. But there's still one area where many gardeners accidentally remove next year's flowers without even realizing it. The mistake happens during pruning. Not every clematis follows the same rules, and treating every variety the same can leave you with a vine that's healthy but produces very few blooms the following spring. That's exactly what we'll cover next, along with the proper way to water deeply during summer and the simple pencil rule that explains why some clematis refuse to climb perfectly good trellises. Now we come to one of the biggest reasons gardeners are disappointed the following spring. They prune at the wrong time. Not because they don't know how to prune, because they don't realize that different clematis varieties follow completely different flowering schedules. If your clematis blooms only once in early spring, there's a good chance it belongs to pruning group 1. That includes popular varieties like Clematis montana, Clematis alpina, Clematis macropetala, and evergreen types such as Clematis armandi. These plants behave very differently from repeat flowering hybrids. They bloom on what gardeners call old wood. In other words, the flowers you enjoy next spring develop on stems that are growing right now. By mid to late summer, these vines are already forming next year's flower buds. That's why timing matters so much. If you decide to reshape one of these varieties in autumn, winter, or even early spring, you're not simply removing extra growth. You're cutting away next year's flowers before they've ever had a chance to bloom. The vine may remain perfectly healthy. It just won't flower. That's why experienced gardeners follow one simple rule. If a Group 1 clematis needs major pruning, do it immediately after it finishes flowering in spring. Once summer arrives, leave the framework alone. Only remove damaged or dead growth if absolutely necessary. That single habit protects the display you'll enjoy next year. Now let's talk about watering. This is another area where good intentions often create unnecessary problems. Many gardeners water their clematis almost every evening during hot weather. The soil surface stays damp. The plant never appears thirsty. So it feels like the right thing to do. Unfortunately, shallow watering encourages shallow roots. Instead of growing downward into cool, moist soil, the feeder roots remain close to the hot surface where temperatures fluctuate dramatically every afternoon. Those roots dry out faster. They become more vulnerable to heat stress. And the plant becomes increasingly dependent on constant watering. The goal isn't frequent watering. The goal is deep watering. A mature clematis generally benefits from about 2 to 3 gallons of water during each watering session. Rather than watering a little every day, water deeply once or twice each week during prolonged hot, dry weather. If temperatures are cooler and rainfall is consistent, watering every 10 to 14 days is often enough. More important than the schedule is the depth. You want moisture reaching 12 to 18 inches below the soil surface. That's where strong, resilient roots develop. Avoid dumping an entire bucket of water around the plant all at once. Much of it simply runs across the surface before the soil has time to absorb it. Instead, let the water soak in slowly. A drip irrigation system works beautifully. A soaker hose is another excellent option. Even a regular garden hose set to a gentle trickle can do the job. Leave it running at the base of the plant for 20 to 30 minutes. The slow delivery allows moisture to penetrate deeply into the root zone instead of disappearing as runoff. Over time, the roots naturally follow that moisture downward. The result is a stronger plant that's far better equipped to handle summer heat. Now there's one final issue that confuses countless gardeners every year. My clematis won't climb. The plant looks healthy. The leaves are green. New shoots continue growing. Yet instead of climbing the beautiful wooden trellis you installed, the vine sprawls across the ground or wraps itself around neighboring stems. The problem usually isn't the plant. It's the support. Here's why. Unlike climbing roses, clematis doesn't produce long tendrils. Unlike ivy, it doesn't attach itself with sticky aerial roots. Every climb depends on its delicate leaf stalks. Each leaf stem reaches out and curls around whatever it touches. But those leaf stalks are surprisingly short. They have a physical limit. If the object is too thick, they simply can't wrap around it. Experienced gardeners often call this the pencil rule. If the support is thicker than an ordinary pencil, roughly 1/4 of an inch or 6 millimeters, the leaf stalk usually can't grip it. That's why so many new wooden pergolas, heavy timber trellises, and large decorative posts fail as climbing supports. They're simply too thick. The clematis has nothing it can hold on to. Fortunately, the solution is incredibly easy. You don't need to replace the structure. Just add something thinner. Stretch green garden wire across the trellis. Attach plastic-coated wire. Use heavy-duty fishing line, bird netting, or even sections of chicken wire. These thinner materials create hundreds of tiny gripping points that the leaf stalks can easily wrap around. Almost immediately, the vine begins climbing exactly as it was designed to. It's one of those simple tricks that completely changes how a clematis performs. By now, you've learned how to protect the roots, encourage repeat blooms, diagnose leaf problems, recognize true wilt, feed correctly, strengthen supports, prune at the proper time, water deeply, and give your vine the support it actually needs to climb. There's just one final thing left to do. Let's bring everything together into one simple July routine that you can follow every single year to keep your clematis healthy, productive, and covered with flowers for seasons to come. Let's finish with a simple July checklist. If you remember nothing else from today's video, remember these 7 habits. Keep the roots cool. Water deeply instead of frequently. Remove spent flowers correctly. Guide new shoots before they become tangled. Watch the leaves for early warning signs. Avoid heavy nitrogen feeding. Inspect your support before summer storms arrive. None of these jobs take very long. In fact, you can complete most of them in less than 30 minutes each week. Yet together, they make the difference between a clematis that struggles through summer and one that finishes the season strong. The biggest lesson is this: don't judge your clematis by how it looks on one hot July afternoon. Many gardeners see a little drooping and assume the plant is dying. Others notice fewer flowers and think the season is over. But healthy clematis naturally slow down during the hottest part of summer. They're not giving up. They're adjusting. If you've protected the roots, maintained consistent moisture, and avoided the common mistakes we've talked about today, your vine is doing exactly what it should. Be patient. Keep following the routine. And let the plant work on its own schedule. You'll often be rewarded with fresh growth, another flush of flowers on repeat blooming varieties, and a much stronger vine going into autumn. Even if your clematis suffered a setback this year, don't lose hope. Many gardeners are amazed when what looked like a dead vine suddenly sends up vigorous new shoots a few weeks later. That's one of the remarkable qualities of clematis. When planted correctly, with healthy buds safely below the soil line, the plant has a built-in backup system. What appears to be the end is often just the beginning of a new season of growth. Gardening has always rewarded patience. Every healthy root hidden beneath the soil is preparing tomorrow's flowers long before you ever see them. That's why July matters so much. The work you do now doesn't just affect this summer. It shapes next year's display. Every layer of mulch you spread protects the roots from heat. Every deep watering encourages stronger root growth. Every correctly placed pruning cut directs energy where it's needed most. Every few minutes spent training new shoots creates a healthier framework that will support future blooms. And every small problem you catch early prevents a much larger one later. The beautiful thing about clematis is that it doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for consistency. A little attention each week is far more valuable than one full day of work after problems have already appeared. That's how experienced gardeners grow vines that become more spectacular year after year. They don't rely on luck. They rely on simple habits repeated every season. And now you know exactly what those habits are. If you're ready to stop wasting time on plants that die every winter and finally build a garden that takes care of itself, don't forget to grab your copy of The Plant Once Garden. It's 150 pages of everything this channel teaches, completely mapped out for you. Just scan the QR code on your screen right now, or click the link in the description below to get started. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. What does your clematis look like right now? Is it still covered in flowers? Has the summer heat started slowing it down? Or are you trying to bring back a vine you thought was gone? Let me know in the comments below. I read as many of your comments as I can, and they often inspire future videos on this channel. If you found today's guide helpful, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next gardening video. Until next time, take care of your garden, and it will take care of you.